Miguel from
Hello.
Spain. Thanks for joining me on your holiday today to talk about burnout of all the things. I know you're having a call while you're on holiday, but anyway.
It's the right place to be for burnout, I tell you. Yeah, because there's very little going on.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what your wins are, but I mean, your win's got to be being on holiday, right? Win of the week.
Yeah. I think this is a perfect place for if you're feeling burnt out. I'm in a quiet place in the Canary Islands, so.
So nice. And you said you haven't even been on the screen at all, really. So that's just like real switching off, isn't it? Which many of us struggle to do. So today we are talking about burnout and ADHD. And before we did this, started this session, I for once got a bit of structure, did a bit of prep, just to see what the actual stats are to remind myself. And it says that ADHD adults are significantly more likely to experience burnout. And in fact, it's 2 to 3 times more likely to experience emotional burnout rather than neurotypical peers. And there is a source here that I cannot pronounce, but it's called Journal of Psychosomatic Research. Oh, I think I did say that right.
Uh-huh.
And then it says 68% of adults with ADHD report frequent or chronic burnout. And this one actually was the one that shocked me the most that I didn't know, was burnout in ADHD starts early. And they say as early as 16. I mean, that's pretty young, isn't it?
Yeah, and that actually doesn't surprise me. It makes sense because burnout is more just being tired. It's biologically is a prolonged stress response. So in neurotypical people, it may just be a continuous activation of your nervous system, and we can get into that a little bit later. But in people with ADHD and other neurodivergent people as well, it's a lot more than that because we from early age, without even realizing, we're just wearing this costume of functioning. We basically realize that we may be really good at some things, but we may not be as expected in other areas of life. And so we need to wear this costume. So we need to wear this mask, basically, just to appear to perform at the levels that society expects us to perform. And that can be in tasks. So it could be just simply performance. It could be in school. So it could be even earlier than 16, you could be burnt out even earlier than 16, just because you feel that, the system that you're in is so demanding and you cannot keep up with the demands. And it's not just a matter of actually being unable to do the things that you're required to do. So it's not it's not being lazy. It's not being less intelligent than other people. It's just that you might need more time to process the emotions that go with all of the processes that you're expected to fit into. And those emotions are likely to drain you. So you have to wear this mask. You have to wear this suit of functioning or high functioning or whatever you want to call it. And that takes you away from being present in yourself and actually acknowledging yourself and the fact that you have specific needs. It takes you away from nourishing yourself properly. It takes you away from breathing properly. So all of these things that we touched upon in last episode as well, that, is not so much always about the brain. It's not so much always about thinking and cognitive processes and the mind and all of this. It's also about the body and the fact that the body needs to be acknowledged in all of this process as well. And then there's all of this shame, perfectionism. You might actually hide behind I want to get it all perfect. But then to get it all perfect, as you'll know, it takes you maybe like twice as long as maybe somebody else. And you're going to produce this amazing piece of work. But if you need to fit into a system that's telling you your deadline is next week, and the ideal of what you want to create means that you need to take another 3 days, and you don't even know that you have ADHD at that point because you haven't been diagnosed. There's all of these kind of like situations that take you into sensory overload, emotional overload that is unprocessed, all of those things kicking in the background, basically. So it doesn't surprise me to hear about those stats.
No. And you know what? It all makes sense. When you look back now and you think about trying to fit into those corporate worlds, especially, and always wondering why you felt so exhausted and fatigued, and why, I would leave jobs quite often as well because of the travel, I would say, or because the travel's too much. And I think something that you said that really, rung true and made me think about is the thing that must be confusing for those that you work around, or even, you know, people that you're just around as friendship groups and stuff, is that actually at one point, because of the ups and downs and our ability to really hyper focus at times and get more done than maybe the average person when we're in a hyper focus, that there isn't the consistency, is there? So at 1 minute we look like, oh, we can do all these, you know, all this work at a really high speed and a high standard in that time. But then all of a sudden we can crash and feel like we need to rest. And I think, would you agree? I think as well that because our brain can work as fast as it does, because it doesn't have that ability to pause as much as a neurotypical brain, that actually we need to be resting probably as much as we're, you know, as much work we're doing, we need to be resting as much as the same. Where because we've got ADHD, we tend to think we can just keep going at that rate and not rest because we think we're invincible, don't we?
Completely.
At times.
And then you say brain, but it's also body, because the brain
Yeah.
is not just floating there like, you know, like an entity. It's attached to the body, and it's feeding it's getting feedback from the body all the time, and it's feeding back to the body and to the gut and everything else. So what happens when you then you're probably going to have more cravings. You're probably going to want to eat the kind of foods that then you feel, shit, I shouldn't have eaten those foods because they're gonna make me feel crap later. They're gonna make me feel sluggish later. But you still do it because you haven't got the energy or the executive function that you require to make those decisions that perhaps are more logical. So you're going to go with the more emotional decisions, and you're going to self-sabotage, and you keep thinking, what's wrong with me? You know, what kind of system have I internalized that keeps me asking to be less because I cannot be my full self all the time? And then that gets you into all sorts of trouble in, you know, in work, for example, you know, and you said you've left jobs, I've left jobs, you know, where somebody's put me on a pedestal to start with, and they thought, oh, Miguel is superhuman. And then you are in that, you're on that pedestal because you basically, you know, initially we crave the novelty, we getting off on all the novelty and all the kind of like excitement of the new job and everything. We give in 300%. And then maybe like, you know, a month thing, we starting to get a little bit bored. You let things fall through the cracks. Somebody's put you on a pedestal, and then that pedestal starts crumbling down. And then they start thinking, oh, maybe this guy is not as good as he, you know, he portrayed to be initially. And that kind of, that hurts because there's rejection in that. And it's just complicated. So in the end, you end up, again, maybe self-sabotaging, maybe turning up late to meetings, or deciding that you're going to leave, or, you know, there's all of those things attached to those situations. So I think, yes, we do put ourselves under a lot of pressure in the sense that society wants you to be normalized. You know, if you're really good all the time. You cannot just be really good today and be like subpar tomorrow, because that's not how people do it. That's not how society wants you to function. And that's how we function a lot of the time. We could be excellent, well above average one day, and then the following day we just don't care about how well we do, because we just haven't got the energy to do it, or not enough motivation, or, you know, a combination of both.
Yeah. It's that word consistency, isn't it? It's like we just, you know, like you say, the world expects consistency, and with ADHD, consistency means something completely different.
Yeah.
Completely different. So personal experiences, you said you left jobs. How, because the thing is as well, I think it might be good to clarify this before that, is we hear burnout chucked around a lot. And I know my friend actually, Hannah Walker Brown, just done an amazing audio documentary on BBC4 about burnout. And there was people talking about like the differences between what real burnout is, and, you know, you got fatigue, you got chronic fatigue and burnout. Do you have like a bit of information around like what is the difference really? Like, how do we know the difference? Because I use the word burnout, or I'm just a bit tired, and not really knowing what the difference is between, you know, all that different vocabulary.
Yeah, so burnout, I mean, they're all related, and they're all related to a prolonged stress response. So we talked about the stress response in the last episode. Fast forward to minute 50 for the definition of phoning, if you're looking for that. If you remember from last time. We got there in the end.
This is what's going to happen with burnout.
So let's get the definitions out of the way.
Yeah,
So
let's do them now.
You have the nervous system and the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, so the HPA axis. So you have your adrenal glands, these tiny little things on top of the kidneys that produce things like adrenaline or epinephrine in American English, and cortisol, noradrenaline or norepinephrine. And they respond to the brain, to the pituitary gland, tiny little gland in the middle of the brain, that is like a radar, a sensor that is getting signals from literally the whole of this nervous system. All of the fibers of nerves that are spread throughout your body are a little bit like antennas. They are picking up signals from the environment. Is it cold? Is it hot? Is there a threat, that a potential danger that is gonna come and get you? Do you need to react? All of that information is being sent to the brain. The brain is making sense of it in different areas of the brain. We talked about the limbic system, which is the primal kind of emotion area of the brain that contains the amygdala, that reacts to things like an immediate threat, and that's behind the fight or flight response. So in a way, this fight or flight response is triggered by something that could be a number of different things. Normally in ADHD is multifactorial. So you have trauma potentially thrown in as well. You have these things that we talked about. So a system that you don't quite fit into. So it could be a school system. It could be the work system. It could be friendships, relationships, eating. All of these potential sources of stress are all compounded into a stress response that your body needs to mount, basically, to allow you to get out of a potential threat or a perceived threat. And when your body's in that stress response mode continuously, then what happens is that you feel dysregulated in all systems in the body. Because when you are alert, when you are almost like a meerkat, like in a state of hypervigilance all the time, there's a point that your body is running out of resources because you're basically using as many resources as you have available to you biologically. You have your blood sugar ready to go because you're going to need to escape danger. And your brain is telling you that there is a danger somewhere. And even if the danger is only imaginary, you have your muscles in alert, ready to go. You have the heart pumping. So maybe your beats per minute are higher, or, your resting pulse is higher because, again, your body's like constantly thinking that it's going to need to escape danger. There's a lot of body responses ready to act.
Yeah.
And in the end, the body just says, I've had enough of this crap. It's just that, I've just taken so much of this that if you relate it to situations like, for example, my own situation, like I had massive burnout at the end of my 40s. Why? Well, for probably 20 years, and I was constantly on the go. At one point, I was living out of a suitcase, traveling 3 or 4 days a week. I'd wake up one day in Norway, the next day I would be in Canada, whatever, and I'm always thinking, I'm fine, I don't need to rest much. I would crash at the weekends maybe sometimes, and I didn't think anything of it until I finally just completely, I went from job to job, degree to degree, always wanting more, doing more, until my body just said, can you have a minute, love? Because I'm just going to break down. And that's what happened, basically. I just broke down physically and emotionally as well. Because that's the interesting thing about burnout as well. It's not just your body breaking down in bits and saying, I just cannot continue this amount of waiting to respond to something to happen. It's just unsustainable. It's also emotional. When you're burnt out, you don't have the resources to even know what you're feeling. Even something that should be quite easy to process emotionally feels overwhelming. And that's quite different to fatigue. And fatigue can be short term. So you could be fatigued for a week and then you take a weekend off, you go on a relaxing holiday, you eat well, and you balance your work-life balance, so to speak. And in the end, you refresh and you recharge your batteries. So it's solvable with rest and with good nutrition and so on, and just a bit of mindful awareness of what's going on in your life. Chronic fatigue, it's a next step. And also, it's not just more than fatigue. So chronic fatigue is multifactorial. So it could be linked to inflammation, to post-viral fatigue. So sometimes it's linked to having had a virus like COVID, for example. So it could be a post-viral syndrome. It could be a mitochondrial dysfunction as well. So these little powerhouses of energy that we have in every cell in the body, sometimes they malfunction because of different things. And it's quite complicated. And sometimes there are genetics as well involved. So if you go into a chronic fatigue state, sometimes it can be quite difficult to come out of that. And it could look a bit like burnout, but burnout is unique in the sense that it's just the result of your body being ready to go all the time and waiting to escape a danger situation that sometimes happens, and then it becomes even deeper, the burnout, because you're actually trying to escape an abusive relationship or a toxic situation at work, or both. It could be loads of different things, financial troubles, all of these things that maybe for the neurotypical brain, they're already hard enough, but for the ADHD brain, they're extra hard to process. So they're all compounded into this thing called burnout that can feel like a really dark cloud that is just upon you and is quite difficult to escape.
Wow. So if I'm right, then it can burnout, you could be in burnout and look like you're functioning. So it's almost like you're functioning in a place of constant fight or flight, basically, like anxiety. So it's not necessarily, I mean, I'm sure it can get to that and that can still be burnout, but it's not necessarily like you're in bed, burnt out, like can't do anymore, that you can be in the midst of burnout and still be doing. And that could take you to chronic fatigue eventually, or not? Or is that just so unrelated?
Not necessarily, but it can take you deeper into the burnout. And I think that the first thing to realize with burnout is that you need to be aware of the fact that you are in burnout and acknowledge it, because many of us don't acknowledge it, and we just think that we'll come out of that because we're going to rest a weekend, or we're not going to go out, or we're going to take a day off in the week and work 4 days a week instead of 5. But if you're not tackling the situations that have been contributing to that burnout, and a lot of the time they may be internal situations and how you have actually been creating this shield to protect you from the world. So you've created this persona that is always happy and smiling, but inside is kind of like freaking out, and you haven't even realized. So, for example, at some point when I was doing all this kind of like traveling and so on, and I was working in scientific publishing, and I was doing a huge amount of travel, and I was going to do training for scientists in different organizations, and I would have 200 scientists there waiting for me to do a training session on medical databases and stuff, which is what I used to do, and in a previous life. And I would hide myself in the toilet for like 10 minutes just until like a minute before my presentation was due to start, because I was thinking, it was that kind of like almost like panic situation, thinking I'm going to need to perform now, and I need to gather my resources because I'm so tired inside that now I'm just going to have to go and like wear this mask of like, oh, Miguel is here, put the smile on, and spend 4 hours talking stuff that ultimately I didn't really care about. And I think it's the acknowledgement of those emotions. To care about, are you in alignment with what you're going to do? Because burnout, apart from being biological, and key differentiator from fatigue or chronic fatigue is that it's relational. It's down to, it's not just the body or the mind malfunctioning, it's your relationships with yourself and with others as well. So are you in alignment with your purpose? What is your purpose? Have you actually stopped and think, what is my purpose in life? Am I in alignment with it? Am I fulfilling my purpose? Am I happy with what I'm doing? Is it contributing to the greater good? Or maybe it doesn't need to be like, we don't all need to be, Mother Teresa of Calcutta, it's not all about being super charitable. It could be selfish. Am I in alignment with the fact that I want to be a billionaire, but I'm just not doing really well? And I'm just, I'm not making ends meet. My vision is that I want to live in Beverly Hills surrounded by wealth, and I'm not achieving it. So that in itself, is a completely made up scenario, but that in itself is going to eat you because you're not doing what your heart desires. So I think what we fail to do a lot of the time is to just have this time to say, I'm in burnout. I'm completely exhausted emotionally and physically. Why? Maybe you're too tired to even think about those things. And that is part of the acknowledgement phase, thinking, actually, I don't even know, but I'm going to acknowledge that I need to take more time to myself and maybe work on boundaries and say no to a few things so you can actually make time to rest and make time to sleep more, or make time to just be alone with your thoughts instead of actually just going always go, 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 because that's never going to give you time to acknowledge and to be aware. And I think that's the first phase of getting out of burnout, is that awareness before the change actually happens.
Yeah, make time for the fuck yes stuff.
Yeah,
because if we're always saying yes to like anything, then we haven't got any space for the fuck yes things. It's what I keep saying to my, when I'm working with my clients. But yeah, I so relate to all of that. And I think now I look back, I think with, being in the corporate environment, then teaching yoga on the weekends, this is when I was like trying to do something I aligned with, but also trying to pay the bills at the same time. I felt like my whole life I've always tried to fill the gaps. So even when I've had gaps, social gaps, evening breaks, like there was a point in my life where I would fill every single gap, to a point that some days I would be traveling across London, 3 different parts of London, to make social plan, to get to every social plan I'd created. And then I'd often find myself going in these cycles of just feeling really exhausted and having to cancel things that I'd committed to. And that would happen in work and social environments. And I think that actually, looking back, probably cost me some friendships as well, because there were times I probably just pulled out of things and it looked a bit like, oh, where's she gone all of a sudden? When you look back, and I didn't have the language for it or know what was going on, but emotionally, like you said, it was an emotional feeling of like, I just felt too tired to commit to all the things. But I think even post ADHD diagnosis, obviously, this is why it's so relatable, this topic at the moment. And so much what you said makes sense, is that after I stopped socializing and doing all the party stuff and filling my gaps there and feeling probably a bit burnt out from all of that, exercise, my morning routine, has become something that was really consistent in my life. It's been over 10 years now. And when I found yoga, and I think what was happening is that it was such a good thing that I continued, as I say, it's been over 10 years now. That felt so good for my body and my mind. But obviously, having ADHD, you go to the extreme, like we spoke about before. And I think it got to about the 8-year mark, and my body started to react into, because that is still exhaustion, right? And if you're talking about us being in that constant on and fight or flight, and we find it quite easy to do that. And then you put in the mix, say, like a breakup, moving house, starting a business, and then you're doing all of these other things on top of that.
Those things are, there's just massive.
Yeah, massive stuff. So if you're already really doing too much, which I think I was on the exercise front, just, at the moment, I'm actually getting support for having enforced rest day once a week, which feels so much for me, which is crazy. This woman I'm working with was like, I'm normally trying to get people to move more, and actually with you, I'm trying to get you to move less. But I think, but it just shows you like prolonged. So for a long time, that made me feel good, and it was good. But it's the prolonged period, like you say, like if you're doing that for a really long time, like I'm 37 this year. And as I say, I've been on probably the majority of my life in some form. But then the physical effects of that is losing my periods, which has happened. But the only thing that I become aware of recently is I'm working with this lady about disordered eating and trying to move like differently and stuff. And she asked about my heart rate variability number, which is 20, it was 24. And I didn't know what that meant, but it's very, very low. And when you're talking about the fight or flight stuff, there's something I found earlier that said that ADHD, we get dysautonomia? Dysautonomia? And they were saying that there actually is a link between that and having low heart rate variability. So I wonder if that as well is like, I wonder if that's like quite a common thing then, that we have this, because we are in that fight or flight mode constantly, that maybe a lot of us have got this low heart rate variability. and we're not in that parasympathetic nervous system enough because we're not resting from the moments we are on these, big highs and doing too much. I mean, what is heart rate variability might be a good start as well, because people might not really understand what that is. I didn't know what it is until 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so there are a few things to unpack in there, and I think the first thing is that our nervous system is a bit like a Lamborghini with the brakes of a bicycle, basically. So you have this kind of a super fast, or like a Ferrari, and then you have tiny little brakes. So we get super hyper excitable about things, and that's the one of our charms. People say, oh, people with ADHD, we are so excitable about things, and we're cheery, and we do get excited. We find it quite difficult to actually then slow down from that excitement, and to find time to self-soothe as well, because I think there's a huge lack of awareness of how we function. So I think there's a lot of talk about how we function and how we might be different and blah, blah, blah. But what I find the more I talk to people with ADHD is that then when it comes to actually sitting down and being self-aware, there's a lack of that. And I think it's just down to the fact that we just don't find time to do it, because I think we just think that we need to fill every minute of the day with something that is external, as opposed to actually look inward or look into, or actually another variation of that. We feel that we need to fill every minute of the day with things that are cognitive based. So think about this, productivity hack, blah, 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 all to do with things that happen in the brain. Increase your productivity. Take 20-minute breaks between tasks. Again, it's a cognitive thing because you need to think about it. Do things this way. It's all about making you change. Yeah, but also making you change the way you do things, which involves thinking. What about not actually thinking, and what about not doing and taking just time to, you say, yoga is your thing, walk in nature, have a cuddle with your dog or with your cat, or, with your pet rat or whatever it is, just find something that replenishes you. And when I'm talking about being replenished, I'm talking about linking that with heart rate variability. So what is heart rate variability, or HRV? Is literally the frequency that the heart beats with and the space between heartbeats. So the space between heartbeats can be actually measured in milliseconds, and that gives you a rate, basically. And there's no ideal heart rate variability for everybody, just as there is an ideal gut microbiome or an ideal size of a nose or ideal size of ears for everybody. We're all slightly different. But having HRV below 30 normally means chronic stress. So it could be heart issues. It could be overtraining as well. So when people do a lot of going to the gym too much, or they do 2 marathons in a week or something, the HRV may actually go down. So ideally you want to be above 100 to be kind of healthy, so to speak.
Above 100?
Yeah, so 60 to 100 plus, and people with really healthy hearts, and people who really sustain stressful situations very well and so on, they're ideally over 100. But, you could actually be very healthy with 60 or 70 as well. So, and the problem with these things is that when you measure them, you could become quite obsessive. So if you
more
have
stressed.
Well, exactly. And it can be a source of stress in itself, which is why I don't wear a Fitbit now. I got completely obsessed with my Apple Watch initially, and then with my Fit. And then I basically got fed up with it and put it in a drawer and never used it again. And then I discovered the Fitbit, and I thought, oh, wow, it's got all these things for sleep and blah, blah. And some people are the same with some Aura ring or whatever.
Yeah, I've got a watch and a ring at the minute. It's just obsessive. It's
Any
actually obsessive.
wearable is super valuable, but at the same time, it can actually be a trigger. And at the time that I decided to stop wearing it, I was just so exhausted that it was actually contributing to my exhaustion, because I was thinking too much. And even though it's funny, it's a nuance thing as well, because walking is really good for me. So I was trying to pack in as many steps as possible, but I was becoming obsessive about the steps that I was doing in a day, to the point that my other half and I were, last time we were wearing the Fitbit together, we were trying to pack in 20,000 steps on holiday. So we were walking after dinner, and then I only maybe had 18,000 steps. And I was walking up and down the steps in the house that we had rented for the holiday And I'm thinking, what the hell am I doing?
It's so true. I don't know if that's the autism side though as well, because it's like you get obsessed with the numbers, and then you're like,
Yeah.
right, I want to keep going, and I've got to get the same amount every day, and it becomes like something you can't break, you know?
So HRV is related to a lot of things. So heart rate variability is related to, for example, menstruating cycles. So if your HRV goes really low, it's not that it causes the loss of the cycle, but it can be correlated. So a lot of the science is based on just associations between facts and situations, not so much a cause. So it's not that your low HRV is the cause of you losing your periods, but there could be a situation that if you manage to improve your HRV, your period might come back. And improving your HRV, a lot of it is done by presence. It's basically mindfulness is the big thing for HRV. So how do you improve mindfulness? Well, you just need to try and be present in the moment and not try to think too much and actually bring yourself to the body. And breath is a big way of doing it. Why? Because when you use breath to soothe and you focus on your breath, and we talked about this a little bit as well in one of the other episodes, you're stimulating your parasympathetic nervous system with the vagus nerve in there, which plugs straight into the brainstem. And we talked about the brainstem as well in the last episode. And the brainstem is really an important part of the brain because it regulates your heartbeat, your breathing frequency, but it also is where you you might feel the feelings of pain, both physical pain and emotional pain, that then are conveyed through a network of different brain areas to the prefrontal cortex, to the limbic system. So that's how you experience pain, basically it comes through the brainstem, which is almost the continuation of the spine into your brain, and is one of the older parts of the brain as well. So there's a lot of these kind of like connections between how the heart is beating, the frequency of the heart, and how other processes in the body are going to be in balance or out of balance. And one of them could be your cycle. So losing your cycle could be a sign that you are kind of like, floating on top of burnout, basically.
Wow. So that could be a way to measure if because they say someone's questioning if they're feeling a bit burnt out, is that it could be a way to see where your body's at, like your heart rate, like how much you're resting, basically, without knowing. Because it has brought awareness to me, definitely, like in a good way, in some ways, because I think it's like, oh wow, that makes sense to me, because I know what the parasympathetic and sympathetic, I talk about loads in yoga, and I'm like, so I know what that means. So how do I get myself in the parasympathetic nervous system more is what I'm telling myself now. And that's like become the goal, how do I start to recover a little bit more, but not enforce it too, like not make it another thing to do, but just pull back a little bit and be okay with that. And I think what you said again, like it's similar to what we said last week, but it all does come back to us with ADHD. And I think this is why diagnosis is so important, or awareness of that, is being able to sit with the uncomfortable feelings that can come from wanting to be on all the time. Like, what is my need to want to do today again, like to fill this gap? Why? Because I even think in the evenings are the worst time for me. And I'm like, what am I going to, I'll book my waxing in, or I'll go and do this. And, you always want to fill the time doing something, because you don't want to, I think with ADHD, we're always trying to avoid the chaos, right, that's going on in our minds. So we'll just like distract ourselves. So I think that's another thing, isn't it? It's like learning where we can, like you said, with the mindfulness, to be able to sit with that uncomfortableness and see and let it pass, that impulse, to just go and just instead sit there.
Yeah, and if you look at what you do with all of this information, because again, what I find that there is in all of this ADHD world, neurodivergence world, podcasts and so on, there's such an amount of information out there that if you're newly diagnosed, if you're thinking of getting diagnosed, or if you've been diagnosed for a while and you're just trying to learn more about yourself and and increase that awareness, it can become overwhelming. Because it's just such an amount to process, and I think a lot of what we've talked about today is down to rhythms. So, for example, you talk about periods. You talk about periods and the cycle. So, menstruation is a rhythm. Basically, it's got a rhythm. that is in line with the moon phases. If you look at HRV is a rhythm as well. So it's like the beating
So
of
true.
a drum. So you have your heart beating, that's connected to the brain. The brain is making sure, or part of the brain, bits of the brain stem connected to other parts of the brain are making sure that your heart is not just going boom, 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 boom. It's going boom, 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 boom. And that there is a frequency, that there is a heartbeat, that there is a little space between the next heartbeat. And that allows for things to happen in a certain way. So, nutrients flow into cells with a certain rhythm. You are exposing yourself to light and dark with a certain rhythm. So what can we do with all of this information that is really, really practical and we can start doing today and is free, and doesn't mean getting even more overwhelmed by having to listen to another 100 podcasts or reading 100 books and, doing all this research. Like basic things like get yourself more in tune with the circadian rhythm. What does that mean? Less screen time in the evening, which probably, now that we come into summer, at least in the northern hemisphere, means that you can have your mobile on for longer and you can have, you can watch TV and be close to a really big screen, the computer screen for longer without having to worry so much about the blue light. I'm not a big fan of blue light blocking glasses. I think they look.
I've got these really ugly orange ones that are like £2, and they're the only ones I think work. But I actually do like them.
Okay, like I went through a phase, but then I was starting to think, I look awful in them, and
yeah, so do I. We should have worn them. Honestly,
sorry.
Honestly, gotta get. They're terrible.
And now
I get all my clients to buy them, and they send me photos. They're like, these are disgusting.
You look a right state on them with them on, and I'm thinking, okay, well, that I don't like it. But anyway, apart from the vanity, I think it's I don't know whether we may be splitting hairs. I think that the real thing is try to make a commitment with yourself. Do I need to be constantly on my phone until midnight, or can I actually have a soft rule that means, okay, it doesn't mean completely just lock it up. Like I've seen these things now that people use, that you lock up your iPhone. Is like, well, what's the point? Because you're gonna need to, you're gonna know the code to unlock it or something, and if you really need it to unlock it because you need to make a phone call, it's going to be really annoying if you cannot unlock it for another hour or something. So I think it doesn't need to be extreme. It just needs to be respect natural rhythms a little bit better. So it could be light, but also movement. Movement is a rhythm. So you say yoga is your thing. It calms you down.
I mean, I'm doing everything at the moment. I do lots of things.
It's soothing, isn't it? Like, what you're doing is self-soothing. So find some yoga postures that allow you to self-soothe, and they could be, typically is the forward bends are a bit more soothing than maybe like
definitely
the back bends, and
because that's what I always say, like chuck yourself over in a forward fold because it's straight into your parasympathetic, and I think for ADHD it just shuts you down, like
exactly
from the distractions and everything.
But things like, we all know that having a bath is relaxing, but having a bath with like Netflix on basically means that you're not enjoying just having the bath. So have a bath, put some aromatherapy oils in there that are actually scientifically known to calm down parts of the brain that are lit up by the stress response. So lavender, for example, neroli is a really good one, which is orange blossom. Vetiver is another one that is really good. It's like a very earthy, grassy smell that is really good for calming down the amygdala, which is lit up when you perceive danger, whether it's real or just in your imagination. And then actually just make an effort to be in the bath, which in itself stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So having a hot bath for 20 minutes has been seen in clinical studies to be good for things like depression and anxiety. And the mechanism that we feel is the reason why it works is the stimulation of the vagus nerve and then the parasympathetic nervous system. So that's a really good way to actually go into parasympathetic drive as opposed to sympathetic drive, and allow yourself to relax while you're in the bath. So you're not constantly, WhatsApping people while you're in the bath or watching Netflix and getting stimulated. Actually try and find space to maybe put a calming playlist on, or even just sit in silence. If you enjoy the silence, just sit in silence for half an hour and have your bath, and make a purposely actually allocate that time to yourself. Just basically say, this is my me time. I deserve it. I'm going to spend half an hour just soothing, and make it as, add it to your to-do list, but your to-do list of things that actually replenish you. So that could be, or it could be going for a walk. It could be going for a walk in the morning. Like if I miss my walk in the morning, like now I'm trying to pack in as much walking as possible, because I do a lot of walk with Finn, with my dog.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to just, overeat and not walk enough. But also it's not just, again, the vanity. I want to like stay slim because I struggle to lose the weight that I put on while I was actually really burnt out. It's the fact that I actually miss it. So I cannot just like hang around just doing nothing. I actually prefer to move, because the movement actually gets me out of my head.
Relaxed.
And I don't wear anything. I don't have headphones on. I don't listen to a podcast. I don't, because that takes me more into my head. And I'm thinking it defeats the object for me. And I think maybe at another point in my life, I will really enjoy listening to podcasts while I'm walking. But now I actually enjoy just listening to whatever soundscapes. It could be the cars by the road. It could be the waves now by the sea. It could be the birds, the palm trees moving, whatever. But those things, again, they are rhythms. The wind is moving. That's a rhythm that's getting into my brain. It's kind of resonating with my own brain rhythm. So basically just nourishing your brain with different sensations. And I think that's a really good way of implementing all of this information.
Definitely. I love all of that. And I think, again, like you said, it's coming down to somatic and being mindful, like doing that one thing at a time. Because it's true, like we will do something that we're meant to be replenishing, have a bath and then put Netflix on, and actually it defeats the whole object. So even though it's really hard with ADHD at first, especially if you're quite new to like mindful practices, but like trying to do the one thing at a time can be so replenishing and change the whole experience of something that feels quite boring to actually something that feels really, enjoyable. Sorry to interrupt, but are you getting bored of the mundane? Doing the same old thing day in, day out? Me too. It's not good for the old ADHD, that. And that's why I'm running away to the mountains this September to host another ADHD retreat. And I would love you to come. From the 11th to the 15th of September, we are heading to the French Alps, home of the Tour de France, for 5 whole bloody days. And this isn't your typical retreat, because you're not typical. So whether you want to hike mountains at sunrise or sleep through breakfast, there is no right way to do this. All you need to do is come as you are and be as you are. So if you fancy untangling your ADHD with me in the magical mountains this September, head over to untangledco.com and let's get out of here. I've actually put some stuff here, like I think the first thing, because obviously I'm actually sort of doing all this sort of stuff right now, but like first thing I think is probably the hardest bit is actually the self-awareness piece, like you said, is accepting and acknowledging that you are either about to go into a burnout or maybe you're already burnt out. And I think everyone's triggers are different. And I know this sounds really silly, but I think like I notice little things, like I've got flies that sometimes come in from the garden, so I'm in like the middle of trees. And I know if I'm coming near to a burnout or I'm tired or something's going to happen, if I'm getting really agitated by them. Like my reaction to my flies that come in from the garden really indicates me my patient levels, like it's stuff like that. It's the small things I start to notice my reaction to and my patience. So I think as well, it's that first and foremost, like find out what your triggers are, like how you are towards other people, or, what is it? When do you start to notice that you're in that emotional burnout? Like maybe it's binge eating for some people, maybe, it's drinking, or they go back to an old vice. There's going to be triggers and self-acceptance around that. And then I think it's just quite similar to what you said, is like, my next thing after that is like, where am I actually receiving in my life? Like where am I not just giving all through my weekdays, and where is moments of receiving? And before that used to be, oh, my morning movement, but actually, as a therapist once said to me, but that's still giving. You're still giving loads of energy in the movement that you're doing right now. So, I think sometimes, like you said, that could be going in nature. For me, it was going to get acupuncture. Like, I do have to take myself out of a lot of situations, like to actually receive, and actually shut myself away, maybe go to sound healing. But I think making a conscious effort and a really small step, like you don't have to, like we said, go to the extreme, but just add in a place where you are receiving in your week. Like you said, if it's a bath, swapping your shower for a bath or something like that. But also, I think the biggest coaching question that I like to ask, because I like questions which don't really make you have like, you haven't really got to act on it, but it's just a thought, it leaves you starting to think things differently. And I think like setting boundaries, but in an easy way of every time you get asked to do something or you're about to plan to do something, asking yourself, is this taking me further or closer away to how I want to feel? Whether your goal is, for that month, that year, whatever it is, I've had a word of the year was like flow, for example. Like, is that taking me further or closer away by saying yes to this thing right now? And I think it goes back to what I said earlier, is like, that allows us to make space for the fuck yes stuff. If we can start to really try and find a pause before we say yes to the next thing, like, do we really have to say yes to this next commitment? Because that's more a prevention tool, isn't it? It's like, I'm more about, can we stop it before it happens? So, because I think that's the half of it, is you get so stressed out about what you've committed to, I do, that it gets, I get to that point, I'm like, oh my God, I've committed to all these things now. I can't let all these people down. So I think if we can have coaching questions or just a thought or a prompt of anything that's just going to allow us to create space, and that can be something that you just have in your day to day, where you just, maybe it's writing every morning, like, how I feel today and what it is I want to commit to. But I think that's the key, isn't it? Like, trying to have those spaces for reflection and being more conscious and mindful with what it is you're committing to.
Makes sense, because also there's such a thing as generosity burnout as well, where
Yes.
you're basically just exhausted from overgiving. And it's not necessarily just giving in the physical sense, just giving things to people or giving time to people. It could just be getting into situations that you haven't been able to say no to, and the over functioning that comes with that, because you must gather all of this executive function power to get you through those situations. And you may be in a moment in your life that you haven't got that extra battery in that particular part of the brain that's going to get you through those situations, but you have said yes because you said yes at the time that you were on a very good day. We talked about this consistency. So you were basically on a high, and you said, oh, yes, I'll do that. And then you're basically on a day that you haven't got the energy to decide whether you want to eat or not, or the energy whether to decide whether you want to wash yourself or not. And you need to show up. You need to show up to record the podcast, and you think.
Exactly, yeah.
Why
but
did I say
do you know what
yes?
decision making, I should have said that before, but decision making is a big tell sign.
Exactly.
I know we struggle with decisions anyway, but oh my God. And it gets to a point where it's just ridiculous. I can't decide anything,
Exactly. And I think feeding back into rhythms and cycles, and tying it with nutrition, for example, is really important in the sense of, what does your nervous system need to replenish that ability for neurons to fire well, and for your nervous system to actually communicate, allow your brain to communicate with the rest of the body and your gut and so on. So you need a lot of protein. So probably a lot more protein than you have been eating. And if you even feel a hint of burnout, increasing the amount of protein. So if you eat meat and fish, then obviously meat, fish, eggs, dairy, those are the kind of like the key sources of animal protein. If you don't eat animal sources, then soy. I know some people are a bit funny about soy, but it's for me, it's much of a myth, to be quite honest. I think it's complete protein and it's super bioavailable. Your body understands soy the same way as if you ate a fillet steak. It's basically gives you all the amino acids that you need to engage in that kind of replenishing. And things like omega-3s as well. Again, they could be fish oils, they could be vegan omega-3s. So there are different sources. But, if you do eat animal sources, things like sardines, and it doesn't need to be complicated. It could be like sardines on top of a salad.
I had mackerel this morning. Is that the same?
Yeah, mackerel on toast or mackerel on top of a salad, or I just out of a tin. Sometimes I just love to have a tin of sardines, like out of the tin. I don't even, I just peel the tin and I put a bit of balsamic vinegar in, and I just eat it. And I give some to Finn as well. My mom always laughs because I do FaceTime, and she says, "You just always share your sardines with Finn because he's obsessed with sardines." So, and
he's got a good life, old Finn, hasn't he?
fermented foods as well. Yeah, he does. Fermented foods are really good again because they give you an additional kind of bit of diversity for your gut. So you're nourishing that gut-brain connection, and polyphenols that are the colors in the antioxidants in the colors in fruits and vegetables and spices. So anything that you can add spice to, saffron, turmeric, sumac,
Love all this.
whatever, all kind of spices will have, they're kind of powerhouses of polyphenols that it's always going to be a good idea when you're in burnout to add all of those extra nutrients. And I think for me that the key with burnout as well is not trying to bounce back. So people talk a lot about bouncing back, which basically almost means going back to a state where you were before. Whereas, because for me, burnout is more relational, is more about alignment, is more about being in a space where you want to be, and the frustration of not being in that space, and the cost, the energetic cost of not being in the space, because intuitively you want to be somewhere else, you want to be someone else, but you haven't got the resources to get to be that person that you want to be. And a lot of those resources you just acquire through life and learning. That's why we are here, in a way. That's the journey of being in this life and being in this lifetime. So in a way, for me, coming out of burnout is not bouncing back. It's actually fertilizing the terrain, the soil, for you to become the person that you want to be. And that's how you come out of burnout, because it's realizing that I'm not in alignment with who I want to be, because of different reasons. Could be relationships, could be work, could be financials, could be a combination of all of those things. What do I need to do to be more like the person I want to be? And it's never easy. It's never going to be just like one thing. It's not something that you just take a week off and you come up with all of the ideas. To me, it took me years to actually feel that I'm not burnt out. And also some days I wake up and I think, ooh, if I overdo it, I can feel it kind of like almost touching me, and it gets scary because I think I don't want to go back to that place where I was before. So it's a delicate balance, and you need to keep working on that, on maintaining that alignment, because it's quite easy to just fall back to that situation that you were before. So for me, when people say bouncing back, actually it feels counterintuitive, because I don't want to bounce back. I don't want to bounce back to who I was before. I want to be more like who I want to be, which is not the person that I was 10 years ago.
Well, who you really are. Like, everything you just said is so powerful, isn't it? It's like it's because we're trying to be someone else, not who we are. And that's normally what's led us to burnout in some way, shape or form, if you think about it, like trying to rush the process.
Yeah.
But actually bouncing back, we don't want to go back to that unalignment and to that, I do think there's a learning, like you say, in everything, like strength within everything. And what is this trying to teach us about where we have gone off course, and actually how can we use it to become more of who it is we really are? And that in itself lets you just feel, it's just calming thinking about it, because it feels less work, because it's just becoming who you really are. And instead of trying to make a plan of like, I want to be like this person, and actually I want to be more like this. And already that's just burnt out, like the thought of it. Do you know what I mean?
I'm tired. Totally. I get exactly what you're saying. So in a way, it's about shedding layers of crap that you no longer need, as opposed to putting more layers of things that you might feel that you need because somebody's told you on a podcast, or somebody, it's like and it could be something subtle, but it's like HRV. Somebody might take the wrong hint on HRV and think that, oh my God, I need to now bring, Miguel said, You need like 100 plus to be super healthy and get super obsessed to get to HRV of 100
No,
plus.
I'm like, here with my 24.
Which probably you're never going to be, because that you need to be like a super athlete who trains, has a balance of training and resting, and they basically their whole career is about improving that HRV. So you as a regular person who goes to work and then goes ASDA and then comes back home and like has 3 kids or something, is never gonna have like a 100 HRV. You might struggle to get 50, and that's what you have. So it's not about using all of those hints as, oh, I must do that, I must now go on a complete program to renourish my gut brain axis, or I must get completely in alignment with my circadian rhythms. It's just actually just taking a chill pill in a way, and like acknowledging that those things are important, but not become obsessive with them. Just be aware of how they make you feel. And if you've gone for a walk in nature in the morning, that is going to reset your noradrenaline and allow you to sleep better in the evening just by doing that, by getting some natural light into your brain through your retinas. And that's going to have an impact hours later in your melatonin production and how your brain processes your ability to sleep and so on. And then you decide that, okay, a few days a week, I'm going to not be on Instagram every evening, just like scrolling while I'm watching the telly. I'm going to actually try and be more mindful. So use social media for spells where I'm actually really going to enjoy using it, as opposed to be doing 3 things at the same time: watching the telly, watching the kids, and scrolling through Instagram, which basically means your brain doesn't really know what it's doing, because he's trying to do too many things at once and is overwhelmed by all these kind of things. Okay, what about if you just simplify your evening and just watch Coronation Street and just allow yourself to enjoy that, but not be on the phone at the same time, not try to do 2 things or reply to emails at the same time. I think simplification probably is the key thing, an acknowledgement of how that simplification makes you feel. So do you feel different by actually making your evening simpler, by not being on social media all the time or trying to do 3 things at the same time? Or just actually, I slept better. Probably it's no wonder, because your brain has less to process during those hours.
Definitely.
So it's winding down more easily into sleep than if you're doing too many things just before you decide that it's time to go to bed. So simple steps and not getting aggy when things don't work the way that you expect them to work, because if you're deep in burnout, it's never going to be just 2 days of not being on Instagram that's going to take you out of burnout. It's going to be a process of acknowledgement and nourishment that is going to take you out.
Definitely. I was just thinking, it's like burnout is sort of like a kick up the arse of the universe, is to say, stop suffering the shit that isn't serving you anymore, and just another sign that you're not in alignment. Like, because even my medication thing, obviously I've said I've come off meds, but it's not, as I said, I'm not saying bye to meds forever, but I was just suffering that for 2 years, because I was like, oh, the system, I can't get another medication now because I'm on the NHS, I don't want to pay again. I was just suffering taking meds every day that wasn't aligning with me and wasn't right for me. Actually, like, again, using this experience of, feeling like how I'm feeling and what's going on, to actually make these changes and just say, no, I'm not suffering that stuff. And that could be commitments you're committing to. That could be the type of work that you're doing. That could be relationships that you're letting in your life. Or it could be the way you're moving your body, over-exercising, or how you're eating. But actually, take it as a sign to say, this is just another, sign to say that you need to let go of something that isn't serving you anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
And be kind to yourself, like have compassion, because again, we don't need another stick to beat ourselves up about, because we beat ourselves up about so much.
So many stakes. We don't need more stakes.
No, and it's like, it's just be kind, gentle, say, wow, like, I'm in this position. I've been trying, because you've been trying so hard, really. If you're in burnout or even near to it, like, you're trying so hard to, fit in and do everything right. And it's like, see yourself with that lens of compassion and know that, it's okay. We all do it. And it's just what you're going to do with that information. Like you said last week, no one is going to save us. And this is just another way to build knowledge to, like, create the change that you want in your life, basically.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Shall I read you my little poem that I wanted to read? This is becoming
absolutely.
a little thing. I used to read this in yoga,
And
but
then
I
I'm going
cannot.
to the beach.
You're going to the beach, yes. So I cannot tell you how many times this poem has been said to me, and I'm sure most ADHDers will relate. So let me tell you the tale of a girl who didn't stop, who climbed every mountain without a pause upon the top. She danced until each blade of grass was clothed in drops of dew, and the sun knew her by name, but the silver moon did too. For a fear had settled in her bones, a fear of sitting still. If you're not moving forward, it must mean you never will. So in time, her dance got slower and she looked at all she'd seen, but found gaps inside the places that she'd never fully been. Because she was a human doing, a human moving, a human seeing, but she'd never taken the time to simply be a human being. This is
Beautiful.
exactly what you were saying. So that was by EH, by the way. I don't know who that is, but EH. So yes, thank you, Dr. Miguel. That was great. You're going to go to the beach now
Yes, I am.
and
Yeah.
recharge. Keep
Yeah,
recharging
exactly.
your wonderful self. So, right, until next time then,
Yes. Thank
let's
you
get
again for having
untangled.
me. And yeah, I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you so much for joining me on the ADHD Untangled podcast. I hope that these episodes are inspiring you to step forward with confidence despite the struggles that you face with ADHD. If you want to find out more about ADHD coaching, retreats, trainings, then check out my Instagram, ADHD_untangled, or my website, untangledco.com. Let's get untangled and show the world what we are made of.